When Marcus found the unconscious woman in the wreckage, he thought he was saving a life. 24 hours later, watching her eyes flicker with an inhuman glow in the darkness of his cabin, he realized the truth was far more terrifying. She wasn't human. She was something ancient, something powerful, something that had traveled across the stars. And now, she was awake. What happened next would change everything he thought he knew about the universe and about himself. Marcus Holly had always been a man who preferred solitude. His cabin in the Colorado Rockies sat 30 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a winding dirt road that became treacherous in winter. At 42, he had grown comfortable with the silence, the endless pine forests, and the companionship of his aging dog, Ranger. The outside world, with its noise and chaos, felt like a distant memory from another life, a life he had deliberately left behind after the accident that took his family. That night, the sky had been unusually clear, stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. Marcus stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, breathing in the crisp mountain air. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears perked, a low growl rumbling from his throat. Before Marcus could react, a brilliant streak of light tore across the sky, so bright it turned night into day for a split second. The object, trailing flames and smoke, descended rapidly toward the eastern ridge, disappearing behind the tree line with a sound like thunder rolling through the valley. The impact shook the ground beneath Marcus's feet. Without thinking, he grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and medical kit old habits from his days as a paramedic and headed into the forest. Ranger followed reluctantly, whining with each step. The trek took nearly an hour, navigating through dense undergrowth and over fallen logs, following the path of destruction carved through the forest. Trees had been sheared off at their trunks, debris scattered everywhere, the smell of burning metal and something else, something organic and unfamiliar filling the air. When Marcus finally reached the crash site, his breath caught in his throat. The craft was unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't large, perhaps 20 feet in diameter, but its surface seemed to shift and shimmer in the beam of his flashlight, reflecting colors that shouldn't exist. The hull was cracked open, revealing a dark interior that pulsed with faint bioluminescent patterns. Steam or smoke rose from the wreckage, creating an eerie fog that clung to the ground. That's when he saw her. A woman, or what appeared to be a woman, lying motionless 15 feet from the craft. She was dressed in what looked like a form-fitting suit made of material that seemed alive, shifting subtly even as she lay unconscious. Her features were strikingly beautiful high cheekbones, full lips, skin so pale it almost glowed in the darkness. Long, dark hair spread around her head like a halo. But something about her seemed off, too perfect, too symmetrical, like a sculpture rather than a living being. Marcus approached cautiously, his medical training overriding his fear. He checked for a pulse and found one, though it was slower than normal and had an unusual rhythm. Her skin felt cool to the touch, but not cold. She was breathing, shallow but steady. There were no visible injuries, no blood, nothing to indicate trauma despite the violent crash. He tried to wake her, calling out, gently shaking her shoulder, but she remained unresponsive. Ranger kept his distance, hackles raised, that low growl continuing, making a decision that would change everything. Marcus carefully lifted the woman, she was surprisingly light, and began the long journey back to his cabin. He couldn't leave her there, couldn't risk someone else finding the craft, couldn't ignore the basic human instinct to help someone in need. The trek back seemed longer, his arms aching, his mind racing with questions. What was that craft? Where had she come from? Was she even human? And perhaps most importantly, what would happen when she woke up? By the time Marcus reached his cabin, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He laid the woman on his bed, covering her with blankets, and sat in a chair beside her, watching. Her chest rose and fell with that strange rhythmic breathing, Occasionally, her eyes would move rapidly beneath closed lids, as if she were dreaming. Once, she murmured something in a language Marcus had never heard, melodic, with sounds that seemed impossible for a human throat to produce. Hours passed. Marcus dozed fitfully in his chair, jerking awake periodically to check on his mysterious guest. Ranger refused to enter the bedroom, instead lying just outside the doorway, watching with suspicious eyes. As evening approached, Marcus noticed subtle changes. The woman's skin seemed to be warming, her breathing becoming more regular. The strange material of her suit appeared to be repairing itself, the tears and damage he had noticed earlier slowly closing. Then, just as darkness fell and Marcus was preparing to try to give her water, her eyes opened. For a moment, they appeared completely normal, a striking amber color, human and aware. She looked at him, confusion crossing her features, lips parting as if to speak. Marcus leaned forward, relief flooding through him, but that relief lasted only a second, because in the dim light of the bedside lamp, her eyes suddenly changed. The pupils elongated vertically, like a reptile's, and a faint green bioluminescence flickered in their depths. Her skin seemed to shimmer, revealing for just an instant a pattern of fine scales beneath the human facade. Marcus froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The woman's eyes widened, seeing his reaction, and something like fear, or was it resignation, crossed her face. She opened her mouth again, and this time, the sound that emerged was that same impossible language he had heard earlier, beautiful and alien and utterly inhuman. They stared at each other in the growing darkness, predator and prey, though Marcus couldn't say which was which. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The woman sat up slowly, movements fluid and controlled in a way that seemed almost mechanical. Marcus stumbled backward, his chair scraping against the wooden floor, creating the only sound in the suddenly suffocating silence. She watched him with those strange reptilian eyes, her head tilting slightly to one side in a gesture that might have been curiosity. Then, as he watched in amazement and terror, her eyes began to change again, the vertical pupils softening, the bioluminescent glow fading until they appeared almost human once more. Almost. She raised one hand, palm outward, in what Marcus recognized as a universal gesture of peace. When she spoke again, the impossible sounds had transformed into accented but understandable English. The words came slowly, carefully, as if she were remembering a language learned long ago. Please, do not fear. I mean no harm to you. Her voice was melodic, with an unusual cadence that made each word sound like part of a song. You saved me. You brought me here. I am grateful. Marcus found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. What are you? The question hung in the air between them, blunt and unavoidable. Part of him expected her to lie, to make up some story, to maintain the illusion of humanity. Instead, she lowered her hand and looked down at her own body, that same strange tilt to her head, as if seeing herself from his perspective for the first time. I am called Sira, she said finally. My kind, we are old. Older than your species, older than most life on this world. We traveled the stars when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. She met his eyes again, and Marcus saw something in them that surprised him: vulnerability, perhaps even shame. We are shapeshifters, adapters. We take the form of the dominant species on whatever world we encounter. It is how we survive, how we learn, how we exist without conflict. Marcus's mind reeled. Everything he thought he knew about the universe was crumbling around him. Aliens were real. They were here. One was sitting on his bed, looking at him with eyes that could shift between human and something else entirely. Why are you here? He managed to ask. Why did you crash? Sira's expression darkened, a flicker of that green glow returning to her eyes before she controlled it. I was fleeing. My ship was damaged in an encounter with others of my kind, those who do not share my Philosophy about coexistence with younger species. There is a war, Marcus. Yes, I know your name. I read it from your mind while you carried me here. She said this matter-of-factly, as if casual telepathy were the most normal thing in the world. A war older than your civilization, fought across galaxies, about whether species like yours should be allowed to develop or should be ... controlled. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Controlled how? But he already knew the answer. He had seen enough science fiction movies, read enough books. He knew what came next in this story. You're talking about invasion, conquest. Some would call it that, Sarah admitted, her voice heavy with what sounded like genuine sorrow. Others would call it guidance, protection, necessary intervention. I call it wrong. I belong to a faction that believes in the right of all species to determine their own destiny, to make their own mistakes, to grow or fail on their own terms. She stood then, moving to the window, looking out at the darkened forest. But we are losing that war. And my presence here, my crash, it will have been detected. They will come looking for me. Marcus felt his legs weaken, and he sat heavily on the edge of the bed she had just vacated. They? How many are we talking about? The question felt absurd even as he asked it, like asking about the weather when a hurricane was approaching. Sarah turned back to him, and for the first time, he saw genuine fear in her eyes. 4, perhaps 5 ships. They will arrive within days, maybe less. And when they do, they will search systematically. They will question, investigate, and if necessary, eliminate anyone who might have seen something. Your government, your military, they are not equipped to handle this. The technology gap is too vast. Then what do we do? Marcus asked, surprised to find himself saying we instead of running for the door. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the overwhelming nature of what he was hearing, or maybe deep down, he recognized in Sarah something he had lost when his family died, a purpose, a reason to fight for something bigger than himself. Sarah studied him for a long moment, those eyes seeming to look right through him, reading thoughts and emotions he hadn't even recognized himself. We have 3 options, she said finally. First, I can leave. I can try to repair my ship and flee before they arrive. You would be safe, ignorant of the larger conflict, your life unchanged. Second, I can try to hide here, hope they do not detect my biosignature, and eventually, they may move on. Or a third ... She paused, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across her features. Third, we can fight. Together. Fight? Marcus almost laughed. I'm a 42-year-old former paramedic living in the woods with a dog. What could I possibly do against alien invaders with advanced technology? But Sarah was already shaking her head. You underestimate yourself, Marcus Hawley. I have seen your memories, felt your pain, understood your strength. You lost your family to forces beyond your control, and it broke something in you. But it also forged something: resilience, determination, a core of steel hidden beneath grief. And more importantly, you have something I need: knowledge of this world, this terrain, these people. I have technology and abilities. You have home field advantage. Marcus stood, pacing the small room. Ranger, sensing his agitation, finally crept into the doorway, though he kept his eyes fixed on Sarah. Let's say I believe you. Let's say everything you're telling me is true. Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't some elaborate manipulation? How do I know you're really one of the good guys? The question seemed to hurt Sarah more than Marcus expected. She looked away, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You don't. You can't. Trust is a luxury we may not have time for. All I can offer you is the truth as I know it, my actions as proof of my intentions and a choice. Help me prevent what is coming, or step aside and hope that whatever happens next leaves you untouched. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the old clock on Marcus' wall. and the distant sound of wind through the pines. Marcus looked at this being, this alien who wore a human face, who spoke of wars across the stars and choices that could determine the fate of his world. Every rational part of his mind screamed at him to walk away, to contact the authorities, to let someone else handle this impossible situation. But another part of him, the part that had died with his wife and daughter in that car crash 3 years ago, suddenly felt alive again. Purpose, meaning, a chance to fight for something that mattered. "Okay," he said finally, the word feeling both terrifying and liberating. "Tell me everything. Tell me what we're up against, what we need to do, and how the hell a hermit and an alien are supposed to save the world." Sierra's expression transformed, hope replacing fear, and for just a moment, her disguise slipped enough that Marcus could see the true form beneath scales that shimmered like emeralds, eyes that glowed with ancient wisdom, and something that might have been a smile if translated across species. "Then we begin," she said, "and may whatever gods either of our people believe in have mercy on us, because our enemies will not." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation and revelation. Sierra proved to be a patient teacher, though Marcus quickly discovered that understanding alien technology and physiology was far beyond anything his human education had prepared him for. She showed him how her biosuit worked, a living organism bonded to her skin that provided protection, environmental adaptation, and even limited self-repair. She demonstrated her shape-shifting abilities, her form rippling and changing in ways that should have been impossible, skin becoming scales, becoming something else entirely before settling back into the human woman he had first found. More disturbing were the weapons. From the wreckage of her ship, which Marcus helped her salvage over 2 exhausting trips through the forest, Sierra retrieved devices that looked organic, like they had been grown rather than built. "Our technology is biological," she explained, holding up something that resembled a twisted piece of coral but pulsed with internal light. "We learned millennia ago that living systems are more adaptable, more resilient than mechanical ones. This is a neural disruptor. Point it, think the command, and it sends a pulse that overloads the nervous system of any carbon-based life form." Marcus handled the weapon gingerly, feeling it warm to his touch, almost as if it were reading him, learning him. "How do I know it won't work on me?" The question was half serious, half joke, a defense mechanism against the overwhelming strangeness of everything. "It won't," Sierra assured him. "I have attuned it to your biosignature. To anyone else, you now register as one of my kind. The weapons will not target you." She paused, considering. "Though I should warn you, there are side effects to carrying our technology. The longer you're in contact with it, the more it will ... to you. You may experience sensory enhancements, accelerated healing, perhaps even minor telepathic sensitivity." Marcus wasn't sure whether to be excited or terrified by that prospect. He settled for practical. "Will it help me not die when these others arrive?" When Sierra nodded, he shrugged. "Then I'll deal with the side effects." But all their preparations seemed inadequate when, on the 3rd morning, Ranger began barking frantically at the dawn sky. Marcus and Sierra rushed outside to see what had alarmed him, and there, hovering silently above the eastern ridge, was a craft unlike anything Sierra had described. It was massive, easily the size of a football field, its surface black and angular, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. As they watched in horror, 4 smaller vessels detached from the main ship, descending rapidly toward different points around the valley. "They are here," Sierra whispered, and Marcus heard true fear in her voice for the first time. "But something is wrong. That is not a search vessel. That is a harvester." "A what?" Marcus demanded, but Sierra was already moving, grabbing weapons, shoving supplies into a pack with frantic speed. "I was wrong. This is not about finding me. Or rather, it is not only about that. They are planning something far worse." She turned to him, and her eyes had shifted completely. no longer trying to maintain the human disguise. Green fire danced in reptilian pupils, her skin rippling with scales. They are going to take this valley, every living thing in it as specimens. This is a harvesting operation, Marcus. They are here to gather, study, and experiment on your species. The words hit Marcus like ice water. There are people in this valley. Not many, but there are families, children. I know, Sarah cut him off. Which means our priorities just changed. We are no longer trying to hide or even just defend ourselves. We must warn the others and find a way to stop this. She strapped weapons across her body, moving with military efficiency. The harvester ships will establish a perimeter first, then begin systematic collection. We have perhaps 3 hours before they start taking people. Marcus felt his old instincts kicking in, the emergency response training from his paramedic days. The nearest homesteads are the Morrison family, about 8 miles north, and the Chun family 10 miles south. There's also old Bill Harrison who lives along the river. If we split up, no. Sarah's voice was firm. They will be scanning for my biosignature. If I am alone, they will track and capture me within minutes. Our only advantage is that I have keyed you into my technology. Together, we may read as a single confusing signal. Apart, we are both vulnerable. Before Marcus could argue, a sound split the morning, air high-pitched, mechanical, and terrifying. One of the smaller craft was descending directly toward the Morrison property, a beam of pale blue light already projecting from its base. In the distance, Marcus could hear what might have been screams, cut short by an eerie silence. They've already started, he breathed, horror washing over him. Sarah Morrison, her husband, their 2 kids. Double coat Sarah grabbed his arm, her grip inhumanly strong. Focus, Marcus. We cannot save everyone, but we can try to save some, and we can fight back. My ship's core is still functional. If we can reach it and overload it properly, we can create an electromagnetic pulse that will disrupt their systems. Maybe even force them to retreat long enough for your authorities to respond. That's a big maybe, Marcus said, but he was already moving, following Sarah as she ran toward the hidden ship wreckage. Ranger bounded after them, and Marcus noticed with shock that the dog's eyes were glowing faintly, the same green bioluminescence that marked Sarah's kind. The exposure to the alien technology was already affecting everything around it. They reached the crash site just as another of the harvester ships passed overhead, its scanning beam sweeping across the forest. Sarah immediately began working on the ship's core, her hands moving over controls that seemed to respond to her touch alone. Marcus stood guard, the neural disruptor in his hands, watching the sky and the forest around them for any sign of approach. How long? He called to Sarah, not taking his eyes off their surroundings. 5 minutes to configure, 2 more to create a sufficient overload cascade, she replied, her voice strained with concentration. But Marcus, you need to understand, once I trigger this, my ship will be destroyed, and the pulse may affect me as well. My biosuit may protect me, but I could be incapacitated for hours. You would be on your own. Marcus thought of the Morrison family, of little Emma who had sold him homemade jam last summer, of all the people in this valley who had no idea that their world had just fundamentally changed. He thought of his wife and daughter, of how helpless he had felt watching them die, unable to save them. Here now, he had a chance to save others. The choice was obvious. Do it, he said. Whatever happens, we do this. But even as Sarah worked and Marcus stood guard, neither of them saw the figure watching from the shadows of the forest, another of Sarah's kind, but one whose eyes held no mercy, no recognition of shared heritage. This one had been hunting Sarah across 3 star systems, and the chase was finally over. The hunter smiled, revealing teeth that were definitely not human, and prepared to spring their trap. The game, they thought, was about to become very interesting indeed. The attack came without warning. One moment Marcus was watching the sky. The next, he was flying through the air, slammed aside by an impact that felt like being hit by a car. He crashed into a tree trunk, the neural disruptor flying from his hands, and struggled to focus his blurred vision. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Sarah scream, not in English, but in that impossible alien language, a sound of rage and recognition. Marcus forced himself to his feet, grabbing for the weapon but finding empty air. Then he saw it, another figure, similar in build to Sarah's human form but making no effort to maintain the disguise. Scales of midnight blue covered its skin, and it stood over 7 feet tall. Muscle and alien grace combined in a form designed for hunting. Its eyes, vertical, slitted, and glowing amber, were fixed on Sarah with an intensity that spoke of long pursuit and bitter hatred. "Sarah the betrayer," the creature hissed, its voice a blend of that melodic alien language and harsh English. "Did you truly believe you could hide from me? From us? Your bleeding heart for these primitive creatures has brought you to this end." It moved forward, and Marcus saw that its hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to slice through steel. "The Council wants you alive, but they never specified in how many pieces." Sarah had positioned herself between the hunter and her ship, her own form beginning to shift, abandoning the human appearance for something more combat-ready. Her skin flowed with emerald scales, her frame expanding, becoming more muscular, more predatory. But Marcus could see she was at a disadvantage. She had been focused on the ship's core, not expecting an attack, and the hunter was fresh, armed, and clearly experienced in combat. "Ken," Sarah spat the name like a curse. "I should have known they would send you. Tell me, how many innocents have you harvested for the Council's experiments? How many species have you helped subjugate?" Her hands had also formed claws, and bioluminescent patterns raced across her scales, some kind of natural armor or energy field activating. Marcus spotted his neural disruptor near a fallen log and began crawling toward it, trying to stay low, hoping the two aliens were too focused on each other to notice him. His ribs screamed in protest, probably cracked from the impact, but he pushed through the pain. He was a liability in a fight between beings like this, but he refused to be useless. Kane laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Innocents? Is that what you call them? These humans who destroy their own planet, who wage war on their own kind, who would reach for the stars only to bring their violence and chaos with them." The hunter lunged with impossible speed, claws slashing. Sarah barely dodged, retaliating with her own strike that left glowing blue blood streaming from Kane's shoulder. "We do not subjugate, Sarah. We guide. We protect the galaxy from species that would poison it, by taking away their choice." Sarah shouted back, pressing her advantage. The two aliens moved in a deadly dance, their speed and power far beyond anything human. Trees shattered under the impact of their blows. The very air seemed to crackle with the energy they generated, by deciding their fate without allowing them to prove themselves. "You remember what we were, Kane. When the elders found us, they did not harvest us. They allowed us to grow, to choose our own path. And look what we became." Kane roared, catching Sarah's arm and slamming her into the ground with enough force to create a crater. "Scattered across 100 worlds, diluted, weak, our culture lost. The elders' mercy was their mistake. One I will not repeat." Marcus's hand closed around the neural disruptor. He raised it, aimed at Kane's back, and thought the command Sarah had taught him. The weapon pulsed once, and a wave of distortion shot forth, striking the hunter square between the shoulder blades. Kane screamed, a sound that made Marcus's teeth ache, and stumbled forward, but the hunter did not fall. Instead, it turned, fixing Marcus with eyes full of murder. "The pet has fangs," Kane hissed. "Interesting." The hunter started toward Marcus, moving despite the obvious pain, leaving Sarah struggling to rise from the crater. "Sarah has been teaching you our ways, giving you our weapons. This is forbiddance, human. For this crime alone, your species could be judged contaminated. Marcus fired again, but this time Kane was ready, dodging with that impossible speed. The hunter closed the distance in seconds, and Marcus found himself lifted off the ground by his throat, Kane's claws digging in just enough to draw blood. Tell me, do your kind beg before death? I have always wondered. The sound of Ranger's bark was followed immediately by 60 pounds of furious dog hitting Kane from the side. The German shepherd's eyes glowed with that same green bioluminescence, and his teeth, when they sank into Kane's arm, seemed somehow sharper, stronger than they should be. The alien exposure had changed him, made him more. Kane dropped Marcus, howling in surprise and pain, trying to shake off the dog. It was the opening Sarah needed. She launched herself from the crater, moving faster than Marcus's eyes could track, and her claws found Kane's throat. The two aliens went down in a tangle of scales and violence, and Marcus couldn't tell who was winning. Then Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Marcus! The core! Trigger it now!" Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran to the ship, to the panel Sarah had been working on, and slammed his hand down on the glowing symbol she had pointed out earlier. Immediately, the ship began to hum, a sound that rose rapidly in pitch and intensity. Energy crackled across its surface, and Marcus could feel the hair on his arms standing up, static electricity building to impossible levels. "No!" Kane's shout was cut short as the pulse erupted outward, a wave of electromagnetic force that rippled across the valley like an invisible explosion. Marcus felt it pass through him, like being submerged in ice water for a fraction of a second, leaving him gasping. Sarah and Kane were both thrown apart, their bodies convulsing as the pulse interacted with their biological technology. In the sky above, the massive harvester ship flickered, its darkness suddenly illuminated with cascading system failures. The smaller craft, including the one that had been approaching the Morrison property, simply fell from the sky, crashing into the forest with thunderous impacts. For several long moments, everything was chaos alarms sounding, fire starting, and the electromagnetic pulse racing outward, affecting every piece of electronic equipment for miles. Then silence. Marcus's ears were ringing, his heart pounding, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. Sarah lay motionless near the ruined ship, her scales flickering between colors, clearly unconscious. Kane was also down, but Marcus could see the hunter's chest still rising and falling. Ranger limped over to Marcus, the glow in his eyes fading, and collapsed at his feet, exhausted but alive. Marcus stood there, surrounded by the impossible, and realized that this was just the beginning. The harvester ship hadn't crashed. It was still aloft, though clearly damaged. And somewhere in that valley, there were still 3 more hunters, probably even now recovering from the pulse and preparing to hunt. He looked down at Sarah's unconscious form, at his loyal dog, at the neural disruptor still clutched in his hand. "Okay," he said to no one in particular, his voice hoarse. "Phase 1 complete. Now what?" As if in answer, his phone buzzed in his pocket, somehow still functional despite the pulse. It was a text from Sarah Morrison. "Military helicopters heading your way. Something about alien activity. What's happening?" Marcus stared at the message, then at the unconscious aliens, then back at his phone. The authorities were coming. The government was getting involved. And he had approximately zero idea how to explain any of this. The game, he realized, had changed again. And this time, the players weren't just aliens and hermits. This time, the whole world was about to find out they weren't alone in the universe. Marcus had roughly 20 minutes before the helicopters arrived, and he spent them making the most important decisions of his life. First, he checked on Sarah, still unconscious, but breathing steadily, her biosignature stable according to the small device on her wrist that pulsed in rhythm with her hearts. Yes, hearts, plural. Marcus tried not to think about that too much. He checked Kane next, but more carefully, keeping the neural disruptor trained on the hunter. The blue-scaled alien was also unconscious, But Marcus could see the beginning of recovery, fingers twitching, eyes moving beneath closed lids. He couldn't let the military take Sarah. Every instinct told him that if she ended up in government custody, she would become exactly the kind of specimen she had been trying to save others from becoming. He also couldn't kill Kane in cold blood. No matter how much the rational part of his brain insisted, it would be the smart move. So he did something that probably made no sense but felt right. He dragged Sarah's body back toward his cabin, leaving Kane at the crash site with enough evidence to keep the military occupied. Ranger helped, despite his obvious exhaustion, taking Sarah's arm in his mouth and pulling. The dog's loyalty extended to Marcus's allies now, apparently. Between the two of them, they managed to get Sarah onto the small utility trailer Marcus used for hauling firewood. He threw a tarp over her, loaded some cut logs on top to make it look natural, and started making his way back to the cabin as the sound of rotor blades echoed through the valley. He had just gotten Sarah inside, hidden in his storm cellar beneath a false floor he had installed years ago during a paranoid phase, when the military arrived. 3 Black Hawk helicopters landed in his clearing, disgorging soldiers in full combat gear. An officer approached, young and intense, clearly keyed up with adrenaline. "Marcus Hawley? Sir, I need you to evacuate immediately. This area has been designated a potential threat zone." Marcus played his part confused hermit, disturbed by the commotion, knowing nothing about crashed spaceships or alien hunters. It helped that he looked the part. Dirty, bruised, his shirt torn from the earlier impact. What kind of threat? "I heard some crashes, saw lights in the sky. Sir, I can't discuss operational details, but we detected a significant electromagnetic pulse originating from this location, and we have reports of an unidentified craft in the area. Have you seen anything unusual?" The officer's hand rested on his sidearm, casual but ready. Marcus thought of Sarah in his cellar, of Kane probably waking up at the crash site, of the harvester ship still hovering somewhere above. "There was a meteor or something last night," he said slowly, pointing vaguely eastward. "Hit somewhere over that ridge. Made a hell of a noise. That's all I know." The officer studied him for a long moment, clearly deciding whether to believe him. Behind them, more helicopters were arriving, and Marcus could see vehicles being deployed, some kind of mobile command center, scientific equipment, even what looked like containment units. This was a full-scale operation. Whatever cover-up or explanation the government had planned, they were taking it seriously. "All right, Mr. Hawley, I still need you to evacuate. You can take your vehicle and your dog, but you need to clear this area within the hour. We're setting up a perimeter." The officer pulled out a card with a number on it. "This is a hotline. If you remember anything else, anything at all, you call it. Understood?" Marcus nodded, taking the card. "Sure. I'll just grab some things." He started to turn away, then stopped as if thinking of something. "What about the Morrison family? The Chuns? There are people scattered through this valley. Everyone is being evacuated, sir. We have teams heading to each residence now." The officer's expression softened slightly. "This is a precautionary measure. In all likelihood, you'll be back home in a few days once we've determined there's no threat." Marcus doubted that very much. As he packed a bag, ostensibly preparing to leave, he was actually planning. The storm cellar had an emergency exit that led into a small cave system, a remnant of his paranoid phase. He could move Sarah through there, get her to the old hunting lodge about 5 miles north that hadn't been used in years. But he needed her awake, needed her guidance on what to do next. The military was securing the crash site by the time Marcus finished his preparations. He could hear radio chatter about biological remains and unknown technology. They had found Kane then. He wondered what the hunter would tell them when he woke up. Whether Kane would try to maintain the fiction or simply eliminate everyone and continue the hunt. Marcus loaded Ranger into his truck, made a show of driving away down the Forest Service road, then doubled back on foot once he was out of sight. The military perimeter was being established, but it wasn't complete yet. He knew these woods better than anyone, knew every game trail and hidden path. By the time darkness fell, he was back at his cabin, slipping through the emergency tunnel into the storm cellar where Sarah lay. She was awake, her eyes glowing in the darkness, looking clearer and more focused than before. "You came back," she said, her voice stronger. "You should have run, Marcus. You should have saved yourself." "Yeah, well, I'm not great at running away from problems," Marcus replied, offering her water. "Drink this. We need to move. The military is everywhere, and I have no idea how long before they expand their search." Sarah drank, then sat up slowly, testing her limbs. The pulse ... It worked better than I hoped. "I can sense the harvester ship. It's in emergency power mode, barely maintaining altitude. The hunters will be temporarily weakened. But this is only a reprieve, Marcus. They will recover, and when they do, they will be even more dangerous. Cornered predators are the most lethal." Marcus helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved through the narrow tunnel. "I left Kane at the crash site. The military has him now. What will he tell them?" Sarah's expression was grim. "Nothing or everything. It depends on what serves his purpose. Kane is a strategist, not just a hunter. If he believes he can manipulate your government into helping him capture me, he will cooperate. If not, he will escape at the first opportunity." She paused, listening to sounds Marcus couldn't hear. "The other hunters are regrouping. I can feel them. 3 distinct biosignatures moving toward the perimeter your military has established. They're planning something." They emerged from the cave system into the dense forest, moving carefully through the darkness. Ranger led the way, his enhanced senses apparently still functioning despite his exhaustion. The old hunting lodge was a grueling 3-hour hike through rough terrain, but they couldn't risk using any roads or trails. Every step Marcus took sent pain shooting through his cracked ribs, but he pushed forward, driven by the same stubborn determination that had kept him alive in the mountains for 3 years. Halfway there, Sarah suddenly grabbed his arm, pulling him down behind a fallen log. Marcus started to ask why, but she clamped a hand over his mouth, her eyes wide with fear. Then he heard movement through the underbrush, too coordinated to be an animal, too quiet to be human. One of the other hunters was nearby, searching. Through gaps in the foliage, Marcus caught glimpses of the creature. This one had adopted a different form, still humanoid, but more insectoid, with an iridescent carapace that shifted colors to match its surroundings. It moved with spider-like precision, its head swiveling in ways that defied human anatomy, scanning the forest with senses Marcus couldn't begin to understand. Sarah's hand tightened on his arm, and suddenly Marcus felt something strange, a tingling sensation in his mind, like someone else's thoughts brushing against his own. Sarah's voice echoed in his head, telepathic and urgent. "It's using thermal and biosignature scanning. Stay absolutely still. Let me mask us." The sensation intensified, and Marcus felt his body temperature dropping, his heart rate slowing. Sarah was using her abilities to hide them both, making them appear as nothing more than part of the forest itself. The hunter passed within 10 feet of their hiding spot, so close Marcus could see the alien script etched into its carapace, could smell something sharp and chemical that made his eyes water. It paused, head tilting, as if sensing something not quite right. Marcus held his breath, not daring to move even an eyelash. Ranger, pressed against Marcus's leg, was equally frozen. Some instinct or Sarah's influence keeping the dog absolutely motionless. Then, from the direction of the military perimeter, came the sound of gunfire, automatic weapons, lots of them, followed by screams and the distinctive thud of explosions. The hunter's head snapped toward the sound, and it took off running with impossible speed, abandoning its search to join whatever battle had erupted at the crash site. Sarah released her hold on Marcus, and he gasped, his body temperature and heart rate returning to normal with a rush that left him dizzy. What the hell was that? He managed to ask between gulping breaths. Kane has made his move, Sarah said, her voice tight with worry. He's attacking the military installation. The other hunters are joining him. They've decided that open conflict is preferable to covert operation. She stood, helping Marcus up. This changes everything. Your government now knows beyond any doubt that hostile extraterrestrial life exists. The response will be ... significant. They continued toward the lodge, moving faster now that the immediate threat had passed. Behind them, the sounds of battle intensified, more gunfire, what might have been grenades or rockets, and underneath it all, those impossible alien screams that made Marcus's bones ache with their resonance. He tried not to think about the soldiers back there, young men and women fighting an enemy they couldn't possibly understand. The hunting lodge appeared through the trees, exactly as Marcus remembered it, old, weathered, but solid. He had helped build it with his father 30 years ago, back when the world was simpler and monsters came from bad dreams, not from the stars. Inside, it was dusty but dry, with supplies Marcus had stashed away during various paranoid phases. Canned food, water purification tablets, a first aid kit, even a hunting rifle with ammunition. Not much against alien technology, but it was something. Sarah collapsed onto an old couch, her energy clearly spent. I need to rest, she admitted, the human facade slipping to reveal scales and that bioluminescent glow beneath. The masking, the recovery from the pulse, it's draining me. A few hours, and I will be stronger. Marcus barricaded the door, checked the windows, then settled into a chair opposite Sarah, the neural disruptor within easy reach. While you rest, you need to tell me the rest of it, he said quietly. What's the endgame here? Even if we survive tonight, what then? That harvester ship isn't going to just leave, and now the whole U.S. military probably knows aliens are real. This situation is spiraling out of control. Sarah met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked truly defeated. I don't know, she admitted. I left my faction to warn developing worlds, to try to prevent harvesting operations. But I'm just one individual against a council that spans galaxies. I thought if I could disrupt enough operations, save enough species, others like me would be inspired to join the resistance. But I'm tired, Marcus. I've been running for so long, fighting battles I can't win, watching worlds I tried to save fall anyway. So you're giving up? Marcus heard the accusation in his own voice, felt anger rising. You dragged me into this, changed my entire reality, put my home and the people I know in danger, and now you're saying it's hopeless? No, Sarah sat up, her eyes blazing with that green fire. I'm saying it's impossible, and I'm doing it anyway. I'm saying that maybe I can't save your whole world, but I can save this valley, these people, you. I'm saying that even if the war is lost, every battle we win matters. Every life we save matters, her voice softened. Your species has a saying, doesn't it? The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I cannot do nothing, Marcus. It's not in my nature, even when the odds are impossible. Marcus felt his anger deflate, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years' hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but the grim, determined hope of someone who has lost everything and discovered they still have something left to fight for. Okay, he said. Then we make a plan. We figure out how to take down that harvester ship, how to stop Kane and the other hunters, and how to do it before the military either nukes the whole valley or captures you for dissection. Sarah actually smiled, a very human expression on her increasingly alien face. Is that all? And here I thought you were going to propose something difficult. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the impossible situation, Marcus found himself smiling back. I've been told I'm an overachiever. Now rest. I'll keep watch. And when you wake up, we're going to need every piece of information you have about that harvester ship and its weaknesses. As Sarah's eyes closed and her breathing settled into that strange, rhythmic pattern, Marcus positioned himself by the window, watching the darkness outside. In the distance, he could see lights from the military perimeter, occasional flashes that might have been weapons fire or searchlights. Somewhere out there, Kane and the other hunters were fighting. The harvester ship was hovering, wounded but not defeated. And the whole world was about to change, whether it was ready or not. Marcus checked the neural disruptor, then the hunting rifle, then his phone. No signal. Probably jammed by the military or disrupted by residual electromagnetic interference. He was cut off, alone except for an exhausted alien and a magically enhanced dog, facing threats he barely understood. By any rational measure, they were doomed. "But we're not dead yet," he muttered to himself, and Ranger's tail thumped once in agreement. Not yet. Dawn broke over a valley transformed. Marcus watched from the lodge window as military aircraft jets now, not just helicopters, streaked across the sky, engaging something he couldn't quite see. Occasionally, there would be a flash of that pale blue light, a harvester beam attempting to capture aircraft, and then the thunder of missiles in response. The battle had escalated beyond anything he had imagined. Sarah woke with the sunrise, looking stronger, her colors more vibrant. She joined him at the window, and he felt her presence in his mind again, that telepathic connection she had established. Through it, he could sense what she was sensing, the harvester ship struggling to maintain power, its systems failing one by one under the military assault. The hunters scattered across the valley, 2 of them injured, one Kane still fighting with desperate ferocity near the crash site. And something else, something that made Sarah's mental presence spike with hope. "A ship is approaching," she said aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not from the council, from my faction. They detected the harvester's distress beacon and my biosignature. They're coming to help." She turned to Marcus, and tears, actual tears, a very human response, streamed down her scaled face. "I'm not alone. We're not alone." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he was carrying. Reinforcements. Help. Maybe they actually had a chance. How long? "They'll be in position within the hour." "But Marcus, you need to understand. Their arrival will force a choice on your government. Either they stand down and let us handle the harvester, or this becomes an interstellar incident that could draw attention your world is not ready for. We need someone to make contact, to explain, to buy time." She looked at him meaningfully. "Someone human, who can speak for both sides." Marcus laughed, bitter and short. "And that someone is me? I'm a hermit who barely talks to his neighbors. I'm not a diplomat." "No," Sarah agreed. "But you're the only human who knows the truth, who has seen both sides, who has fought alongside me. And more than that, you're someone who understands loss and still chooses to fight. Your leaders will listen to that. They have to." So Marcus found himself 2 hours later, walking toward the military perimeter with his hands raised, Ranger at his side, Sarah hidden in the forest behind him. Soldiers immediately surrounded him, weapons drawn, and he was marched at gunpoint to the command center, a collection of armored vehicles and communication equipment that had transformed his peaceful valley into a war zone. The commanding officer was a hard-eyed woman in her 50s, a colonel whose nameplate read Morrison. Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. This must be related to the family he had worried about. Her first words confirmed it. "Mr. Hall, my niece Sarah says you're a good man." "I hope she's right, because right now you're the only person who might be able to explain what the hell is happening in my valley." Marcus took a deep breath and told her everything. The crash, Sarah, the hunters, the harvester ship, the faction war being fought across the galaxy over the fate of species like humanity. He showed her the neural disruptor, let her examine it, explained about the electromagnetic pulse and why the harvester was vulnerable. And finally, he told her about the ship that was coming, the ones who were on humanity's side. Colonel Morrison listened without interrupting, her expression revealing nothing. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sir, I need you to understand my position. I have 4 dead soldiers, 24 injured, and a situation that is so far beyond my pay grade, it might as well be on another planet." Which, apparently, it kind of is. She gestured to a screen showing radar contacts. "I have aircraft inbound from 3 different nations, all demanding to know what's happening. I have the president himself on hold, waiting for an explanation. And you retelling me I need to stand down and let your alien friend and her people handle this?" "Not stand down," Marcus corrected. "Coordinate. The harvester ship is already failing. One more concentrated push, but with Sarah's faction helping, and it can be driven off without it taking any more lives. But if this turns into a full-scale battle, if the Council decides Earth is too much trouble and decides to just sterilize the threat ... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Morrison's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to trust aliens. To trust that these good ones are actually good, and that they can handle their own kind. No," Marcus said quietly. "I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I've seen enough to know the difference between someone fighting to save lives and someone taking them. Trust that I wouldn't be standing here, putting myself in the line of fire, if I didn't believe this was the only way to save everyone in this valley, including your family." The colonel studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then she picked up a radio. "All units, this is Morrison. Cease fire on the unidentified bogey. I repeat, cease fire. Establish a defensive perimeter, but do not engage unless fired upon." She fixed Marcus with a hard stare. "You have 1 hour, Mr. Hawley. If your alien friends don't deliver, if this goes south, I'm authorizing a full strike package. Do you understand?" Marcus understood. He contacted Sarah through the telepathic link she had established, felt her relief and determination, and watched as her faction ship descended through the clouds. It was beautiful, organic in design, like Sarah's crashed vessel but larger, its surface rippling with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of peaceful intent. It positioned itself between the harvester and the valley, and Marcus felt power building, some kind of weapon or field that made his teeth ache. The harvester ship, recognizing it was outmatched and outgunned, attempted to flee. But Sarah's people were ready. The field they had generated trapped it, holding it in place while simultaneously disrupting its systems. On the ground, Sarah emerged from the forest, accompanied by 3 other members of her faction. Together, they moved toward the crash site where Kane and the remaining hunters had barricaded themselves. Marcus accompanied them, against Morrison's orders but with her grudging acceptance, the neural disruptor in his hands. The confrontation was brief and anticlimactic. Faced with Sarah's reinforcements and the disabled harvester ship, Kane had no choice but to surrender. The blue-scaled Hunter-S expression was pure hatred, as Sarah-S people bound him with organic restraints that seemed to grow from their own bodies. "This isn't over," Kane hissed at Sarah. "You've won this battle, but the war continues. There are 1,000 harvester ships, 10,000 hunters. Your rebellion is nothing but an annoyance to the Council." "Perhaps," Sarah replied calmly, "but it's an annoyance that's growing. And now Earth has been officially marked as a protected world by my faction. Any future harvesting attempts will be met with force." "You've failed, Kane. Accept it." The harvester ship was towed away by Sarah's faction, limping into orbit and then jumping to hyperspace, taking Kane and the other hunters as prisoners. The larger ship remained for another hour, its captain an elderly member of Sarah's species whose scales had faded to silver with age meeting briefly with Colonel Morrison and a hastily assembled team of government officials who had been helicoptered in. Marcus stood apart from the negotiations, watching the sun rise higher over his valley, surveying the damage. Broken trees, scorched earth, the crashed vessel that would be studied for years. His quiet life was over, he knew. The world had changed in 3 days, and he had been at the center of it. There would be interviews, debriefings, probably surveillance for the rest of his life. The government would never truly let him go. But as Sarah approached, her faction ship preparing to depart, Marcus found he didn't regret any of it. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "I must," she replied. "There are other worlds, other harvesting operations to stop. And now that my faction knows about Earth, they can monitor it, protect it. You're no longer alone in the universe, Marcus. None of you are." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "But I wanted to thank you for saving me, for fighting beside me, for choosing to care about people you don't even know. Your species has hope. Not because of your technology or your intelligence, but because of individuals like you who choose compassion over fear." Marcus felt the telepathic link between them beginning to fade as she prepared to leave. "Will I see you again?" Sarah smiled that very human smile. "Perhaps. The universe is vast, but it has a way of bringing allies together when they're needed most. And Marcus, take care of that dog. The genetic modifications from our technology exposure are permanent. Ranger will live a very long life, and he'll need someone who understands what he's become." Then she was gone, walking toward the beam of light that would take her up to her faction ship. Marcus watched until the vessel disappeared into the clouds, heading for stars he could barely imagine. Ranger pressed against his leg, and Marcus reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, feeling the faint warmth that indicated the alien enhancements were still active. Colonel Morrison approached, looking exhausted. "Well, Mr. Holly, congratulations. You've just become one of the most important people on the planet. There are about 100 government agencies that want to talk to you, not to mention every scientist, journalist, and conspiracy theorist on Earth." Marcus sighed. "Can I at least go home first? I need a shower, coffee, and about 12 hours of sleep." Morrison actually smiled. "I'll see what I can do. But Mr. Holly, thank you. Sarah and her family are safe because of what you did. A lot of people are safe." She held out her hand, and Marcus shook it. As Marcus walked back toward his cabin, surrounded by military escorts, but feeling freer than he had in years, he looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, Sarah was continuing her fight. Other worlds were facing their own first contacts, their own choices between isolation and integration into a vast galactic community. And Earth, whether ready or not, had taken its first real step into that larger universe. The next day, he had discovered she was the Reptilian from the crashed ship. But what he had truly discovered was something far more important, that the universe was stranger, more wonderful, and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And that even a broken man living alone in the mountains could make a difference when it mattered most. The stars were no longer just distant lights. They were possibilities, challenges, and perhaps, someday, destinations. The universe had come to Marcus Hale's doorstep, and neither he nor the world would ever be the same.